Hey everyone, happy holidays. Darren Eastman here, Product Manager for GitLab Runner. Hey, so today we'll cover, as always, the iteration plan for GitLab Runner, and specifically the 13.8 iteration plan. Given, of course, that it's December, it's the holiday season for a lot of folks across the world, we have a few of our team members that are taking some extended time off and getting some well-deserved rest and relaxation. And this has been a very long and trying year for a number of us. And so with that said, we have some reasonable goals for 13.8. Some of these things that we actually talked about, as a matter of fact, in the 13.7 kickoff plan, kickoff release video. And so as I kind of talk about what's on deck with 13.8 in terms of the focus areas for GitLab Runner, I'll kind of give a little bit of additional context and color in terms of what's changed. So really quickly, as always, we've got the Runner team iteration plan, which you can go and have a look at in GitLab itself. And then really a quick aside, since this is our last kickoff video for this calendar year, I'll also be following up with a more extensive video that talks about the broader GitLab Runner vision, strategy, and how that fits into the overall GitLab strategy in terms of being that single DevOps platform. So we'll look forward to that. We'll cover hopefully kind of how we see things evolving with GitLab Runner over the next few years. Obviously things will change, but we'll at least kind of paint a picture in terms of how we're thinking things will evolve. So look forward to that forthcoming video. So jumping into 13.8, for those who have kind of been following along, the one change that we made in our iteration plan definitions for 13.8 is that in addition to using sort of that must ship label here, we're also calling it must complete. And the reason for that is that there are a few activities that we're doing in 13.8 that aren't necessarily code related. It's some of the activities around research into understanding what will be needed to implement specific features, and then also research into some other platforms, and we'll talk about that as well really fast. All right, so the first thing we'll jump into really quickly in terms of what we're trying to wrap up in 13.8. The first feature we're now calling allow user to specify multiple pull policy for the Docker executor. We talked about this in 13.7. We had a different name back then for it. In 13.7, and then back in, the problem this particular feature was meant to solve was, in certain cases, if for some reason, while the GitLab Runner, whether it's on the Docker executor or on the Kubernetes executor, is trying to retrieve the container image from a target container registry, if for some reason the connection to that target container registry fails, or the container registry itself is unavailable, then the entire the CI jobs fail. And so the original feature that we were working towards and we discussed in 13.7 was introducing a brand new pull policy to mitigate for the risk of those types of failures, those network failures, or availability failures of the target container registry. So one of our engineers who's working on this, Steve Azzaparati, actually, as he got into this, kind of came up with a different concept, and we'll talk about what that new concept is here really quickly. To help us kind of understand what that looks like, let me just pop over here and just quickly zoom in. And I put this together because just in reading some of the community discussions on related merge requests that we had around this particular space, it was clear to me that whether it's because of the legacy labeling used by Kubernetes in terms of describing pull policies, or even our own labeling and so on, it's sometimes hard to understand or quickly remember how the logic works for the different pull policies and what it all means, and sometimes it gets a little bit, for want of a better term, a bit squirrely. So I felt that to give folks a bit more context in terms of what this new feature is, let's go ahead and put together something that so folks can quickly visualize the current state and then what the new capability will look like. Just really fast, on the top portion of the screen here, what I'm describing, are the current pull policies that are available in the GitLab Runner today, both the Docker executor as well as the Kubernetes executor. And again, this match what you see upstream in Kubernetes. So you have the if not present, the always, and the never pull policies. So really quickly, if not present, the logic basically is pretty straightforward, right? If the container image is available locally during the execution of a pipeline job, then we'll use a locally available container image. If it's not available locally, then connect to the container registry and pull the image from the container registry of choice. That's the type the container registry is set. Always is pretty straightforward. Always is basically set. The logic says, hey, once that is set, always pull the container image from the container registry or repository. And then finally, never says always use the locally available container image. In this case, the image always is assumed to always exist locally. There's no attempt made to pull the image from a container registry or container repository. And so what we're doing with the new feature, the new approach for the feature is, instead of creating a brand new policy, which would have meant we'd add a fourth policy into this list above, it's actually combining or allowing users to specify both the always and the if not present policy in their runner config.toml file. And so what this ends up with is the following logic. If a user sets this new configuration, once of course the feature is done, the logic will be such that use the always pull policy, which is this one. If the connection to the container registry is successful, yes, then go ahead and pull the image from the container registry. Here is the fallback mechanism. The fallback mechanism is in this logic. If the connection is failed, which is the no in the logic flow, if the connection failure is equals to no, then use the if not present pull policy. So which then basically says, oh, I can go ahead and pull this image locally. So it's really a kind of interesting way of solving that registry connection problem without, to Steve's point, which is quite well said, without introducing a fourth policy, which means we're no longer in alignment with what's happening upstream in Kubernetes. But at the same time solves this key problem statement of, hey, what happens if you're using a policy like if not present for whatever reason, but then the container registry, the upstream container registry that you're pulling from is not available. So that's kind of this is basically what's happening in 13.8, and that's the new logic that we're working to get across the finish line. And we'll hopefully get that done as well. The other thing that we're doing in 13.8 is that we are wrapping up some work related to the variable inside other variable feature, which is this one. We're looking at it here on our 13.8 iteration plan. The specific subset of the work that we started in 13.7 that's pretty close to getting done, actually, which is very exciting to see. But we'll have to wrap up some of the reviews for the OpenMRs in 13.8 before we can merge that into the code base. Is this logic around introducing a topological sort? So anyway, the main issue that we're trying to deliver is this use variable inside other variable issue. And what's interesting about this is, as we've gotten into this from a runner engineering perspective, and we have realized that now that with this specific feature, most of the work is actually going to be happening outside of the runner, or all of the work actually is going to be happening outside the runner and really in our quote-unquote our Rails app, in the GitLab app itself. So we're pretty close in terms of 13.8, and the focus into 13.8 will be to wrap up the variable topological sort feature. So what that gets us is, it gets us most of the logic that allows us to eventually ship this feature where you will be able to define a variable in a GitLab YAML file and then use that variable definition later on within the same GitLab YAML file. The other pieces that are missing, however, is when we're done in 13.8 with the topological sort, I should just close that, with the topological sort capability, that will be behind a feature flag. We'll need to come back in and make some UI changes in, say, the 13.9 iteration so that you can have a toggle switch in the UI. So that'll be some additional work required before we can have a fully functional feature that's easy to ship. So one of our runner engineers is looking to wrap that up in 13.8. I can go ahead and close these other two. Oh, no, we've done that. The other kind of two pieces of work that we're focused on for 13.8 for sort of the runner core subset of our portfolio. One is a design spike around enabling Windows build pause in the Kubernetes executor. And this is a feature that's been requested by quite a number of customers. It's got a lot of, let's just actually go for the feature right here. It's got a lot of community support and customer traction behind it. And so what we're looking to do in 13.8 is to kind of really dig in and kind of figure out what we need to do in order to actually implement this feature. And so based on the research that we're planning to do in 13.8, that will inform what the implementation is for us going forward to actually deliver that feature. And then we'll certainly be able to then forecast a much more realistic target milestone for shipping this particular feature. And then finally in 13.8, we want to wrap up some work from our standpoint, which is around testing the GitLab Runner with Podman 2.2. This particular testing activity is related to us adding, we have a feature here, the long-term, next couple of releases, hopefully we can get to it, is adding support for Podman 2.1 plus, or I should say 2.2 at this point, to the GitLab Runner. There's been a lot of communications from Red Hat around the fact that the Docker container engine is not an OpenShift or in Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. The Red Hat container runtime solutions, if you will, are Podman, Builder, Scopio, and Run-C. And so with Podman 2.0, we believe, and then the extension and the use of an API that's sort of Docker compatible, it seems very likely that it's easier for us to add support for Podman 2.1 to GitLab Runner. In terms of the actual testing activity, since we created this issue about a week ago, there's been a number of community members, and I think some folks from the Red Hat community as well, that's already actually jumped on this and actually started testing. So our work in 13.8 will just probably, hopefully, be a final bit of validation, making sure that there are no edge cases that we have missed. And so that, again, this will help us inform what's the next steps that we need to take from a GitLab Runner perspective to say that we have Podman as a sort of a fully supported, container engine for GitLab Runner going forward. So those are the key things for Runner Core. And so the key new feature that we're hoping to ship for Runner Core, as to recap, will be this ability for users to specify multiple pull policies for Docker Executor. For Runner Cloud, the focus in 13.8 continues to be the work on the autoscaler to support the beta rollout of the Mac OS Build Cloud or Mac OS runners on GitLab.com. Again, just to recap, we are currently in a closed beta for the Mac OS Build Cloud. We have a number of folks on there. The autoscaler is what will allow us to autoscale that environment that we're using to handle CI jobs at scale. So the autoscaling work will continue in 13.8. And then around our broad runner enterprise management, sort of GitLab, all things related to the runner in the GitLab UI bucket. Nothing planned to ship in 13.8. As I mentioned, we'll be creating another video around the long-term vision and strategy. So we'll talk a bit more detail there about some of the things that we've heard from customers that are informing the areas that we want to prioritize in improving the runner user experience in the actual GitLab UI, and then in terms of capabilities that are interesting and helpful and will provide value for sort of enterprise management of runners at scale. So that's it for 13.8 plan. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to, it's probably easier just to tag me on an issue if you've been following along, deeastman@gitlab.com. And that's it for 13.8 for Runner. Have a happy and safe holidays, everyone, and talk to you soon. Cheers.